Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the All Burgundy and Gold post-game show as the Washington Commanders defeated the Atlanta Falcons by the score of 24-16 today in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Glenn Thomas with George Templeton, Wole, Ray, and Mo are out. George, what's going on with you today? The Washington Commanders pick up a W. Look a little bit better today, but not great, but better.
Yes, I mean, some of it's a factor of the team on the other side and the mistakes they made. And if you're frustrated about anything, they had a chance to really put this thing away and kind of make it easy on us. They didn't do that. But a lot of people who had to show up and stand for something stood for something today. And I think, and we'll get into all that, but it's just great to see them bounce back because they were so horrible 10 days ago. And now the season's still on. You can still have hope. There's still a chance for success this year.
Yeah, still a chance for success this year. The Washington Commanders, as I mentioned, 24-16 over the Atlanta Falcons. Let's get a particular out the way. Let's get some stats out the way first. Sam Howell today, 14 for 23, 151, 3 touchdowns. You had Brian Robinson, 10 carries, 31 yards, no touchdowns. Had a big, huge catch. Touchdown on the screen. Sorry, had 1 touchdown, no touchdowns rushing. Terry McLaurin, 6 catches, 81 yards. Curtis Samuel, 4 receptions, 42 yards with the touchdown. Then you have Brian Robinson with 2 receptions, 25 yards with a touchdown. Curtis Samuel, to me, is the guy who has been standing out in this offense, right? This is his 3rd week, I believe 3rd or 4th week where he has scored a touchdown in this offense. They've getting him the football. George, let's get started here. What did you think about Washington at the opening drive, right? We talked about it on the pregame show, right? You and Wole talked about it on the pregame show. What should Washington do? Which side of the ball would you like to see Washington on first? And you picked the offensive side of the ball. Were you impressed with the offense's first drive going down the field?
Yeah, there was a pretty good rhythm. I thought, they weren't running it a lot, but they were having success in the passing game. We had the quick passing game from Howell, which is kind of like their run. You're disappointed, of course, they didn't get the touchdown. But honestly, just to see their nose in front to start a game after the way most of these games have gone this year where they've been trailing early, I'll take it. Honestly, I was just glad to see them score, glad to see them put a good drive together, and yes, Atlanta responded, but it's just to me, it set a good tone for the game, and it changed the tenor of the game for them to score first and to have a good drive to start. I think it probably gave everybody some confidence.
I think it was good, but one thing I don't like about it, and then we've seen this multiple times this year with this offense, is they get the ball first, they have a drive, whether it's a hold, whether it's a sack, whether it's something within the red zone that pins them back and make them go backwards, so they don't end up with the 7, right? I think that's the biggest deal for me is like when you get there, when you get the ball first, you want to be able to score a touchdown, and this team was able to score a field goal. Like I said, I love the fact that momentum was there. The play calling I thought was there. It just some mistakes couldn't get into the end zone. This Washington team, which almost you think about it, really kind of burns them a little bit or cost them. That didn't cost them or burn them, but it made Atlanta went down the field after Washington and did what every other team except for the Arizona Cardinals did on the first drive of the game. They go and score a touchdown, right? Or score on the first drive of the game, which, mind you, Atlanta hadn't done it all season long.
Yeah, they hadn't even got a first down on the first drive.
Hadn't even got a first down on the first drive. And what was big there was I thought we was in trouble for the Commanders were in trouble all day. Was we talked about on the pre-game show getting off the field on 3rd down. Atlanta on their first drive had 2 big 3rd downs, 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9, and was still able to capitalize on was able to get first downs in that situation, which Washington has to get off the field in those situations.
It ended up, but you know what? Here's the funny thing about it. I think the first 2 drives of the game, they had about 3 or 4 3rd down conversions. I saw Nikki Javala tweeted out, and they were all 3rd and long. They really stopped Atlanta on that after that. They only ended up 5 for 15, and I want to say they were 4 for 6 or 7 to start the game. So Washington did tighten up on that, to be fair. But yeah, it felt like the same old story early in that game with they couldn't get off the field on 3rd down. Like you say, they were sabotaging themselves in the red zone. But let's give everybody a lot of credit for finding a way to turn it around and as a result, kind of get on top in this game and start dominating a little bit, even though the stat sheet won't say that.
Yeah, stat sheets won't say that. If you're an Atlanta Falcon fan and you look at the stat sheets and you just looked at the stat sheet and didn't look at the score, you'd have thought the Atlanta Falcons won this game, right? The Atlanta Falcons, and we talk about this defense. Yes, the defense held Atlanta to 16 points today, right? It could have been more. This defense gave up 402 yards to the Atlanta Falcons, right? I know people going to say, oh, Jack Del Rio, he dialed up some pressure today. Yes, pressure caused turnovers. He dialed up pressure. They got 3 interceptions. This team still gave up 402 yards of offense to the Atlanta Falcons. They stiffened up inside the red zone and got tough and then allowed touchdowns, but gave up 402 yards. And we talk about Eric Bieniemy. I'm not giving him no pass on this. Or Sam Howell only had 193 yards of total offense.
Mm-hmm. At least they were opportunistic. At least they were opportunistic in the red zone after missing that first one.
Yeah, opportunistic in the red zone. You got 24 points, which is great. Score another game where they got 20-some points. But at the same time, you still have to be able to have offensive drives, right? Let's see. I understand one of the drives was short thanks to Jamison Crowder, right? Anybody who says they need Dex Milne, let's be honest. Jamison Crowder, Dax should be just cut right now. Put on the practice squad. Whatever.
The only bad thing is for Jamison Crowder. You know what that punt return reminded me of Richard Crawford in overtime against the Ravens, where it looks like he's gonna get a touchdown and then an elephant jumps on his back 20 yards away from the end, and that's what it looks like. Jamison Crowder's going along, screaming, "Score, go!" And then all of a sudden, something fell on his back, a piano or something, and then he gets caught. It's like, doggone it, we hadn't had a punt return for a TD for 7 years. And he almost did it, but it's like, you're right. Special teams can change the game, and that's a perfect example. They don't win this game without that because their offense did nothing for long stretches in this game, and you had to have a short field today to win, and the special teams gives them one.
Special teams gave them a short field, and now as we talk about special teams, I want to stay there. The Gunners today, right? You had Reeves out, and we today special team Quan Martin and all those guys on special team, they stepped up today, right? Special team players, the Gunners of special teams stepped up today and allowed Atlanta not to have a short field. Atlanta had to drive down the field, even in the end. Atlanta always had to drive down the field. So special teams was huge today on receiving the ball as well as tackling. Shout out to the special team coordinator. Washington did a great job today on special teams. No. George starts on special teams.
Absolutely. I mean, and Tress Way had a bad punt that could have cost us. The defense actually held up, and then he comes back with a big 51-yard punt later, and they covered it. And it's the eternal frustration any of us that are Washington fans have, because certainly Glenn and I, we're old enough to remember when they had some of the best special teams in the NFL, and you just see how you can flip the field. That's how a team can outgain 402 to 193 and win. It's because if the other team's inside their own 20 and you're at the 50 all the time, that's what happens. So that is absolutely right. And everybody deserves some credit. And, Sly didn't have a bad kick. Cheeseman didn't have any bad snaps back, anything like that. That looked sure-handed and Crowder. I mean, we've been hollering for him, but like you say, Quan Martin too. We've been hollering for him to get out there, and he gets out there on special teams and on the defense and makes a play. And if it weren't for that kind of half-assed, there's no other word to say it, roughing the passer penalty, Quan Martin would have had a huge sack.
Right.
That would have just about killed the game off for him, and instead they call a dadgum penalty on it.
But that's another reason people don't like Cody Barton, because Cody Barton was the reason for that penalty, jumping up, hitting high. So guess what? I saw people on Twitter talking about Cody Barton again today. What we mentioned guys who came in guys who stepped up today who has been gone or hadn't been on really play much. Khaleke Hudson today.
Yes.
Khaleke Hudson today finally got some burn, right, at linebacker, and he came in and made some plays early on. I think he had the sack or it was a tackle for loss against Riddler.
And he had a big stop on that 2-point try that Atlanta went for that made no sense. Him and Jonathan Allen. But how long have we been calling for Khaleke Hudson too?
Right.
And you finally give him a chance, and look what happens. He produces.
Yeah, Khaleke Hudson produces. I mean, this is a young guy who has showed what he showed what he could do in Dallas, but had some injuries and things of that nature. Now back here in Washington, he now here in Washington has an opportunity, and he showed you today he could be a game changer for this Washington defense, and he was. Saw Jack Del Rio change up a little bit. Saw the 3 linebacker set today from Jack Del Rio. I do think he tried a little bit today. I don't know. Question for you and those listening. Those who just joined us, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the bell notification. If you're on YouTube, follow us on Facebook if you're watching on Facebook.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. We saw, was this Jack Del Rio defense different, or was this the players being more aggressive in getting the job done, or a little combination of both?
That's a tough one because, again, early in the game, it was the same old, and the Falcons were going right down the field. He did adjust a little bit, but I do think players were more aggressive, but I think that's also a product of we talked about 2 of them, Khaleke Hudson and Quan Martin. They're finally getting a chance. If you've been busting your tail in practice and you're not getting in, the other guys are playing bad, you finally going to get in, you can't help but play like your hair's on fire because you don't know when they're going to pull you back out for one of the other guys, even if one of the other guys ain't doing the job. So, I think it's a little bit of both, honestly.
Yeah, because, we saw Jack dial up some blitzes today. You saw some linebacker blitzes today. You saw guys rushing. He brought a 6-man pressure late. We talked about that play where Cody Barton got the personal foul, but Quan Martin ended up getting the strip. So we saw more pressure today. We talked about it on the pregame, and Woolley talked about it on the podcast this week that Washington needed to bring more pressure. Jack Del Rio needed to bring more pressure. And when they brought more pressure, it seemed like Ridley was uncomfortable. Right, he threw 3 interceptions today. This defense had 3 interceptions today. You had St. Juste that got 1. You had Davis got 1, right? And then you had Kendall Fuller that got 1. And one thing about Davis's one, James Davis interception, he got beat on that play early in the first quarter, first and second quarter. If you go back and look, he got beat on that. I was sitting there, I was talking at dinner, and I was like, you know what? They're going to come back to that sooner or later because they beat Jamin across the middle, and this time he played it right. Somebody said, well, he might have had a little hug. They didn't call it. So if they didn't call it, it didn't happen. Right? It didn't happen.
And they made a lot of soft calls in favor of the Falcons today, so I'm not hearing that. I want to look, we've been hard on Jamin. We've been hard on all this defense. Let's give them their praise and their flowers when they make plays like that. And, and again, a couple of different times, Jamin Davis got tackles in key spots to keep the clock moving when we needed. I think he had 1 on that drive as well before the interception. And I want to give him the praise on that. And I'm trying to think, who was it that got in there that caused that interception in the end zone? I think it was St. Juste that got it. Was it St. Juste? It was St. Juste that got it. But who got the pressure on doggone Ritter? Because whoever it was came absolutely unblocked free and was all over Ritter, and Ritter just heaved it up. And it was the easiest pick. Even our guys couldn't drop it.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Stephen Thomas says Cody has something on Del Rio. No way would be on any other team. I think he's right, man. Cody Barton, I know I don't disagree at all. But one thing I can say, the Atlanta Falcons bailed Washington out a couple times today. And talking about just by play calling, by situational things, by jumping off sides. If we don't get a delay of game situation, there's nothing for that delay of game situation. The delay of game caused the interception, right? They was on the 1 yard line, get a delay of game, and then they had to back up, and now you have to go for it and throw. So again, Washington, it was Toohill. Thank you. Yeah, because Toohill had to get another name.
Toohill, that's right. Who had a monster game? My goodness.
Toohill had a monster game today, right? Toohill had a monster game today. This defense stepped up. It's not where they need to be, but they stepped up tremendously. And so I my hat off to the defense. I'm not gonna say take my hat off to Del Rio because there was some still questionable things late, but the defense stepped up. Chase Young had a decent game today. Did miss a sack. Deron Payne had a good game, and Jonathan Allen had a great game. They shut down. Let's be honest. They shut down the Atlanta running game today.
Yes,
they shut down the Atlanta running game. Everybody was worried about this Atlanta running game. They held the Atlanta running backs to 102 yards. Right? They held
specifically Algier and Robinson combined 26 carries, 88 yards. As good as those two guys are, that's a tremendous performance. I mean, you can lose to a team that does that, but you got a chance. I mean, that's 3 yards a carry basically maybe 3.5. So that's Bijan Robinson, as we were discussing earlier, is an all-world talent. So to hold that running game down to that is pretty darn good.
Do you think the front four or the defensive linemen lived up to their expectations today? As I'm gonna use what Candy said in the pregame. Did they live up to their pay grade, or were they getting paid today?
You know what? I think at times it wasn't the case, but I think in the overall, when you look at the whole picture, I think you have to say yes. They got in on Ritter. They got pressure on him. They got in his face. They got hits on him, when they didn't sack him. Yes, there were some mistakes. They get the penalties and this and that, and it's frustrating. But you got to say, you don't let Bijan Robinson, who might win Rookie of the Year, get loose on you the way he's gotten loose on a lot of other people. You hold their two best running backs to combined 88 yards, maybe 3.5 yards a carry, maybe whatever it was. I think Candy was spot on about that, and I think they lived up to it today. I think there's a few times. Yeah, there's a few misses. I mean, that Chase missed the one on Ritter. That was a heartbreaker because they would have been off the field, and that was about the only third down conversion I think they had in the second half was that play. But I thought the front was really good today. This is certainly the best that the linebackers have played by a long way today, and you got to hand it to them. That said, it's also like you said, Ritter missed some things. There was a couple of times that our secondary got cooked, and he just missed the throw. And you just look at that and you say, what's going to happen against the better teams when we got to play them? And that's the age-old question. But we can shelve it at least for this week because they won and they're back to 500.
And, and Ray brought a good comment. He said they heard how bad they were since the Chicago game and came out motivated. I agree with you, Ray. They came out motivated. You can tell they came out motivated today. And what helped that motivation, too, was that they had a lot of Washington fans in the house. Did you hear that crowd in the house in Atlanta? There was a lot of Washington fans in the house. When you look through there, Ray, y'all got to talk. It was a lot of Washington fans. I knew when my nephew was down there today, came all the way from – so there's a lot of Washington fans that was in the house.
Anytime a big penalty was called against Atlanta, it was a humongous cheer. I mean, the burgundy and gold turned up. But Ray mentions that, and it's so true, but it's been the frustrating thing. For the last 20-plus years, that's been Washington. The moment you praise them and pat them on the back, they'll throw the biggest clunker out there you've ever seen. But if they get a week or 2 weeks of being told that they ain't worth a darn and they're terrible and they're a disgrace, they'll bow up and say, I'll show you. And then that's when they come out and play a good game. And of course, that's the age-old thing is, can you back this up by playing well again next week? Because it just hasn't happened around here very much.
And it's the New York Giants next week, but Mark made a comment as well. I'm glad we won. Guys, we done a lot right and wrong. It's not perfect, but we got to win. Still, Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera has to earn people's respect. We shall see what happens next week.
Well
we
said,
talked
Mark.
about that. Mark, well said, because next week is the New York Giants, and we know if the New York Giants have not done, they've been Washington killers, right? They've beaten the Washington Commanders or made games close, or tied with Washington like last year.
Yeah.
Right, that made Washington Commanders scratch their head. And Washington's going into a game where it should be a winnable game, right? It should be a game that they should win, but they have to show up, and they're at home again. Last time you were at home, you stunk up the place. Washington should be able to move the ball on the Giants. But nonetheless, back to what Mark said, what will it take for Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera to earn the respect of the fans back?
They have to go on a winning streak. But they have to go on a winning streak and beat somebody legitimate. If they go beat the Giants next week, and then they beat the Eagles in 2 weeks, then we got something to talk about. Then we got something serious could be happening here. But that's if you want to earn the fans' respect, show up and be consistently good. Don't come out here next week against the terrible Giants up in New York, where there'll probably be some burgundy and gold up there again because Giants fans ain't going to be up there. They're not excited about this team. Their team's probably going to get blown out by the Bills tonight, to be honest, in that Sunday night game. Go up there and don't just do what you did today. Go up there and beat the brakes off of them. They're a bad team. If you're a good team and you're a playoff team, you go up and wallop the Giants. The doggone Cowboys beat them by 40, for goodness sake, and they're not that good as we've seen the last few weeks. So what are we talking about here? Mark is right, but to earn that respect, you have to back up your good performances with more good performances. You have to continue to improve, and you've got to show that you're willing to be a little bit flexible and willing to make some changes in the game when things aren't working. And Jack did it a little bit today, but it's got to be more, because again, you can argue that Washington should have lost this game because Ritter missed some things, and I'm not going to argue with you, but I'll go the other way. At 24-10, Washington should have blown this team out and gotten this game over with, and they didn't do it, and you just can't keep doing stuff like that.
I agree with that point, George. I think Washington had an opportunity to blow this game wide open. Atlanta gave them the ball back with a short field at one point, and Washington didn't score, right? They didn't even get 3 out of it because they got backed up because of a holding call. The one screen that Washington was successful on got called back because of a holding call, right? Or the other screen, the first screen that Washington had got called back because of a holding call. Those are the type of things that mistakes that good football teams do not make, right? Good football teams capitalize on mistakes of other football teams, on bad football teams. One person we have not mentioned today on this show, which I want to give his props to, he's been the most consistent thing, in my opinion, on the Washington defense all year. He's a quiet guy, don't get much, people don't talk about him much. It's Cam Curl. Cam Curl today made some great plays, had some plays that he broke up, some plays that he was right there, not swatted some balls away, especially on third down. Had another big day today with 11 tackles. Again, I mentioned I don't like seeing safeties have that many tackles because that means running backs that gotten into the backfield. But Cam Curl, again, had another big day for this Washington Commanders defense. And he is, to me, one of the most vital parts of this defense and one of the most vital parts in the secondary because Cam comes each and every week and he's consistent at what he does. He's a short tackler. He also had a tackle to keep the runner inbound, to keep the clock going late in the fourth quarter. So, and that's something he does consistently. Cam Curl lights out on defense. Don't get enough credit, but want to make sure I gave him his credit today. Cam Curl is that player. Kendall Fuller showed up today as well. With the big interception, first interception of the year for Kendall Fuller. Set up a touchdown. Ask you this: is this Danny Johnson? Another one. Danny Johnson showed up today too, as well.
Yeah,
taking the place of Emmanuel Forbes. Do you set Emmanuel Forbes next week?
I think you got it. You've won the game, so you gotta keep going with what's worked. That's the view that I have. But I would say to Forbes, look. Be ready, because Forbes has got a chance to learn from this. That's what he can do. He can learn from this. He's got that opportunity. Be ready, because we are going to need him. We are going to need him somewhere. Maybe, and it may not even be next week. It might be against the Eagles. Who knows? But yeah, no, I'm not starting Forbes next week. I think I'm going to roll with the same lineup. You brought up one of the times we didn't score off a short field. We get the turnover on downs in the last 3 minutes of the game, and I'm like, this game is over. Why did we not make Atlanta use all their dadgum timeouts? Not that it made a difference because they messed it up. But seriously, there's nothing wrong with running 3 times and either trying the long field goal or doing what they did and pooch punting it. And again, Tress Way, that was massive, that pooch punt at the end. Absolutely huge. But why are we leaving a timeout on the board? I do not understand that from Ron Rivera and this offense. And I understand Bieniemy wants to be aggressive, but Cleveland did the same thing, and it's going to cost them this game against San Francisco. They did the same dadgum thing when they had the ball late, didn't make San Francisco use all their timeouts, kick the field goal anyway, and they're about to get beat because San Francisco's in field goal range the last 10 seconds of that game. I don't understand that from Ron Rivera. Don't leave them a timeout.
Yeah, I blame Bieniemy. I'm gonna put it on Bieniemy. I don't want to give all that to Ron because everybody talk great about Bieniemy. To me, I think he tried to outthink the Atlanta Falcons. If you go back to that first down play, he brought in a heavy set, right? He brought in a heavy set and threw the freaking football, right? Knowing that they only had 3 timeouts left. To me, at this point, you're not running the ball terribly, right? They really haven't beat you. They haven't really stopped your run. You just didn't run as much as you could have, right? So you could have ran 4 times and got them, or 3 times and got them to lose all their timeouts and then try a field goal. Or if you're not in field goal range, get a pooch kick at this point. But it got to the point where it was 3rd and 8. You had to throw the football. And Sam Howell didn't have a great day. He threw the ball behind behind Terry McLaurin. And so again, I blame that on Bieniemy, man. And I'm not, like I said, I know people give him a pass. Yes, they put up another 24 points. I don't think Ron made that call. Eric Bieniemy made that call, try to outsmart the Atlanta defense, and he didn't, and it almost cost him. Run the freaking football. Make them burn their timeouts. That's elementary, right? That's coaching 101, right? And yes, they might have had the 2-minute warning. I understand that, but that doesn't mean anything. All right, it's just a 2-minute warning. Could get the time off the clock. Now you give them an extra timeout in the 2-minute warning. Not good. All right. So again, that's on Bieniemy. Can't at that point. You can't outthink people, right? And I know we as fans who sit back and watch it, like some things are just common sense. Run the football.
Yeah, no, don't outsmart yourself. And that was a real frustrating. That had me really annoyed. Also because honestly, in a dome too, you could have kicked that field goal. And Sly's a better chance to make that than closer one. And he might have booted it through, and you might have won the game anyway. I don't know.
I was like, make sure you're running, trust your offensive line and your running back. Now, speaking of offensive line, got to go there today, George. They gave up another 5 sacks. The offensive line gave up another 5 sacks. Some of it was on Sam Howell.
Most of them were for me. I would have put 4 of them on Sam Howell. I mean, the line struggled again in that regard. There's no question about it. But at the same time, and this is where I'm getting frustrated with Sam a little bit. You are a good runner, Sam. You're not Lamar Jackson, some of these other really elite runners as quarterbacks, but you're a very good runner. 2 or 3 times I'm watching it and I'm like, Sam, bail, run, go now. And he either waits or he waits. Like one of them, he literally could have gone right up the middle of the line. There was a hole for him to run right through. And I'm like, Sam, take off and run. And I don't know if it's a product of he's been hit so much, and he's taken these big hits and this and that. Because he had one of the really good short yardage plays. Sam, read option, pulled the ball and ran and slid for a first down. And I was just like, that's what I want. But he's got to understand it is okay to bail and run sometimes. Yes, there are quarterbacks who do it too quick. Fields has been criticized for that. Jackson's been criticized for it. Others have been. But sometimes it's the right move because he can easily run for first downs. He's a good runner. So the line is still not great, but I actually think they did fairly well today. And so a lot of that, unfortunately, was on Sam. You got to take off and run sometimes or bail out and throw it out of bounds, which, he did it a couple times, but there's a couple other times he could have done it to avoid sacks and didn't.
Yeah, and by the way, San Francisco misses the field goal and Cleveland wins.
Wow, what a win for Cleveland. PJ Walker, an XFL guy, pre-pandemic XFL guy who really was a star in that league. Yeah. I like that kid, so I'm glad for him, and I'm glad for Cleveland because that is a real dadgum defense in Cleveland they got.
Yeah, I'm happy for him, and somewhere the 1972 Dolphins are saying they're down.
Clinking the champagne. See, because they did that, because they got number 17 against the Redskins, I root for somebody to end that because I hate seeing that video of them winning that Super Bowl against Washington every time. It just gets me.
It does. It gets me as well. You talked about this Washington Commanders offensive line, and we didn't have Charles Leno today. We found out before during the pregame the loss of his daughter, and we had a replacement step in. I thought the line did well, right? I thought the line did well. They gave him what he needed. To me, some of Sam's balls were behind. I think he tried Terry McLaurin too many times today. Now, it wasn't his fault, the drop that Jahan Dotson had. That was on Dotson. We got to talk about Jahan Dotson. I like this. I love Jahan Dotson, and I've been a guy saying that Jahan Dotson could be a little bit better than Terry McLaurin. But today, Jahan Dotson dropped one that Sam Howell put right in his hands, and that should have been 6.
Yes, and I say this as somebody that was absolutely 100%. I was buying every bit of Jahan Dotson stock I could get. I drafted him in so many fantasy leagues, et cetera, so on and so forth. I'll tell you what, honestly, maybe he needs to sit. Maybe he needs to be benched and start the games not on the field because this is ludicrous. I mean, when you watch this guy in college, he never dropped a pass. And last year he never dropped a pass. And now, I mean, that drop today. What is going on? I mean, that's a play he's going to make in his sleep. And you're right. He catches that at 6. It's 6 easy. What? I don't know. He's got to hit the reset button too. He needs a reset button.
Yeah, sophomore
sure
slump. It is definitely deadly. Sophomore slump is deadly, and that was his only target today. Sam Howell never went back to him after that. Only target today. It was that target right there. He did not catch the ball. Again, you feel for the guy. You want him to do better. But again, it wasn't that many passing attempts as well. Anyway, today they kind of stuck with the run, and the reason it wasn't that many passing attempts, it wasn't that many run attempts, was that the Atlanta Falcons had the ball for 36 minutes. Right. I want to really put it in perspective and paint the picture for the people who didn't watch the game or didn't pay attention. At one time in the fourth quarter, the Falcons had ran 34 plays, and the Washington Commanders had only ran 12. In the second, 12 plays in the second half. And Atlanta had 34 in the second half. 34 plays in the second half. I think that was something around about the fourth, somewhere in the 7-minute mark of the fourth quarter. Again, it shows you how this Atlanta Falcons team was able to move the ball, just wasn't able to get into the end zone. Remind me of the Washington Commanders team a couple of years ago that could move the ball, move the ball, had a lot of time on possession on the clock, but didn't get into the end zone. How much did Del Rio, go back to the defense real quick, how much did you think Del Rio's defense confused Ridder today?
I mean, it certainly wasn't the case early, but when he started to change things up, when he started to change the pressures and started to do the blitzing and stuff, I think it absolutely caused Ridder a problem. I think he because look, we just haven't been doing it that much, and that's the frustration is. That's why he's got to change it up more, because we can surprise people. And in the second half, like you said, I mean, like we talked about, a couple of those Ridder interceptions are guys that are coming, that are going right in his face, about to inhale him, and he just yaks it up in the air and it gets picked. Del Rio did a good job with that in the second half. The question is, why do we have to start out predictable 4-man rush, the same 4-man rush, the same drop 7 that everybody's seen before, instead of trying to change it up and get them and get teams kind of out of balance, early in the game and get them on their heels on the offense?
All right. Who gets your game ball for the Washington Commanders today?
Got to be Casey Toohill. Got to be Casey Toohill. I can't believe I'm saying that. Casey Toohill was an absolute wrecker out there. I mean, some big stuffs behind the line too, where we haven't even really talked about that. He had a couple of nice plays where he helped stuff the running backs either behind the line or at the line of scrimmage. Casey Toohill gets that for me. There are admittedly a lot of people you could give it to, but he gets it for me, absolutely.
I'm gonna go with Jameson Crowder.
Mm-hmm. It's a good one.
I think Jameson Crowder today gets my game ball, and I think prior to that point, offense was lackadaisical. Defense was okay. Crowder gets the punt, and it ignited, right, a difference in this team. And it made this team a little bit different, right? They got the touchdown. Got the touchdown, and then this team, you saw the energy and the excitement generate. So I think today, for me, Jameson Crowder would get the game ball just off the fact that the punt return made a difference in this game, because they got the lead and they never gave it back after that, right? They got the lead off of that possession and never gave it back. So to me today, game ball goes to Jameson Crowder. George, give me about two positives. What are two positive takeaways that you get from this game?
Well, you know what? Let's talk about the fact that even though it wasn't a lot of yards he threw for and he got sacked a bunch, Sam Howell still had some wonderful throws in this game, and Eric Bieniemy called some great stuff on the goal line to get us in there after that first possession when they didn't go. But I'll say that Sam Howell not turning the ball over, big in this game, absolutely huge that we didn't turn the ball over. That's one takeaway. The other one is seeing the guys that we've been calling for to get a chance, like Khaleke Hudson and Quan Martin, getting in there and actually making the most of it. We need that. We desperately, desperately need that. If we're going to have any chance in these tougher games that are going to be coming up down the line, players like that are going to have to make plays for us. So those are my two big takeaways.
Takeaway for me is that, as you mentioned, guys that came in and filled in today, you have a depth chart at linebacker. You have guys at linebacker like I say, Khalid Hudson can play. I think he could one day take over Cody Barton's, unless Cody Barton really has something on Jack Del Rio.
Like Stephen said.
Like Stephen said. But no, one takeaway there that you have some depth at the linebacker with some young guys like Khalil Hudson. The other one was that another positive was that this special team unit is special, even without Jeremy Reeves. Because the special team unit, as we mentioned earlier, with the tackles and everything they did, had a great game, set up good field position. And the last one is the secondary, right? This secondary had got talked about all week, and I hated the fact that Emmanuel Forbes wasn't in when the good things were happening, because it makes it look like, hey, you're better without this young kid, right? You're better without Emmanuel Forbes. But the positive is that the defense was able to cause 3 takeaways. We talked about that in the pregame show. That was one of my keys to victory, that the Washington Commanders had to take the ball away from the Atlanta Falcons in order to win the game, and we proved it to be true today. All right, Joey, we got to talk about it. We got to get into it. What is your negative takeaways from today's game?
Oh, gosh, the biggest negative takeaway here is that after that first drive, we really couldn't sustain anything long drive today. Atlanta's defense is decent, but it's not as good. It's not as good as some of the defenses we faced. And honestly, not being able to put the game away, and that's in part because we couldn't really sustain any drives after the opening drive of the game. That's tough. I mean, that is really tough, because if I'm not mistaken, that first drive they got 56 yards on the first drive, and you get 137 for the rest of the game. That's nothing. So that's the big negative. The other big negative is we were doing so good about not jumping offside, and then we get 2 offsides in the fourth quarter, and both of them could have cost us big. Seriously, fellas, if you're not going to get home and sack people, don't be getting in the dadgum neutral zone and giving them a free 5 yards. It's like, just quit doing that. Seriously. I know one of them was because the guy had a cramp or got hurt, and so it was kind of not his fault. But, man, just little things like that. We got away with it today, might not get away with it next week, certainly won't get away with it against Philadelphia in 2 weeks.
One of my things is this, that and people may get on me for this, and I'm going to be that guy, and I take it. The fact that we are missing sacks in the backfield. The fact that guys are missing, like, clear on sacks. I'm reminded of the one that was on the scoring drive that Chase Young missed.
Yeah.
And then they end up scoring later on. I think at this point, you should be able to complete the sack, right? Be able to get there, pull the quarterback down. I think one of the things there is a negative for me. You brought up the other negative, that this offense didn't put up a lot of yards. Scored a lot of points, right? But didn't put up a lot of yards. And to me, that's concerning, because the Atlanta defense was okay, wasn't great. And as you mentioned, you have the Philadelphia Eagles in 2 weeks, not overlooking the Giants at all. But you want to be able to click in on all cylinders. And for a team that didn't score, got out of the gate with the Bears last week, or became a one-dimensional team last week after they were down so much, you needed to see a balanced offense. The other negative for me is this, that the Washington Commanders still has not had a 100-yard rusher. Run the football. Try to run the football. How can you be a play-action type field team, throw down the field team, if you're not running the football effectively and efficiently?
Right.
And this team has not ran the football or effectively and efficiently today. And that's one of the negatives here. Stephen says this, and I'm going to talk about this. Bieniemy play calling in the fourth quarter. Stephen, you're 100% correct. Yeah. I thought the play calling in the fourth quarter by Bieniemy was kind of a little bit of atrocious. I thought the play calling was bad. because I thought there was times where he should have ran the ball, ran the clock out. And if this was Scott Turner, we would call it, we would be calling it bad. Let's call a spade, right?
That's right.
Eric Bieniemy does not get a pass because this was Scott Turner. Everybody was saying, would be saying Scott Turner was trash for not running the football there. And I'm gonna say today, Eric Bieniemy kind of hurt this team with some of the play calling down late. George, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I mean, he gets the one big difference between him and Scott Turner is we would not have been as successful in the red zone with Scott Turner because we weren't. And at least when we got to short fields after the Crowder kickoff punt return and the Fuller interception, we cashed in with touchdowns. We hadn't been doing that the last 4 or 5 years. So we give him that's the good, but Stefan's right. You're right, Glenn. Some of the play calling, and we had talked about it earlier about not running the ball in the last couple minutes of the game to make Atlanta use their timeouts after they got the fourth down stop. You know, that was not good. And you've got to do the basic things well, but you also don't have to outsmart yourself. Don't leave a team with a timeout when you don't have to and when you shouldn't, because they will come back and it will come back and bite you. You do that with the Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts. We know what Jalen Hurts can do in a 2-minute drill. We saw it in the Super Bowl last year.
Yep.
Doggone it. You can't do that. So, yeah, I think I think Stefan's right. I think you're absolutely right. That fourth quarter play calling was not what it should be. I mean, he dialed up some pretty stuff. You know, the touchdown plays, particularly the Gibson and the Brian Robinson ones, were fabulous calls and fabulously executed. But, yeah, the fourth quarter play calling was not good.
And I'm glad you brought that up about the Brian Robinson's touchdown with the screen. That was all will, right? We've seen this guy in the last 4 or 5 games. Once he gets the ball in hand and he sees the end zone, he puts his head down and he goes. And that's one thing I think everybody likes about Brian Robinson. Even though it was a fumble in the Philadelphia game, Brian Robinson put his head down. He got extra yards. He fights for extra yards.
Yes.
And we saw that. Antonio Gibson today. I'm going to take my hat off to Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson fought for extra yards today, all right, and was able to get extra yards today and did not fumble the football. Yeah, so again, you can start to see in this team that they're starting to feel it a little bit. Maybe it was Atlanta. I don't know if it was Atlanta or not. We'll see next week against the New York Giants. But you're starting to see a different type of the enemy effect with some of these guys that had been in the doghouse, but now coming out and they need to run the football. And we saw Antonio Gibson in different positions today. Saw him at wide receiver, out at wide out, saw him in the backfield. So it was good, the good use of Antonio Gibson today by the Washington Commanders and Eric Bieniemy.
Totally agree with that. And look, having that kind of a varied attack, you can put a defense on their heels doing that. So, we've got our frustrations. Glenn and I are kind of singing from the same songbook here. We want this team to run the ball more and be more balanced in that regard. But you can't deny some of the play calls that he's pulled out, the fact that they've been as successful in the red zone as they have. That is the Bieniemy effect, because that was not happening under Scott Turner. That's not been happening under most of the coaches we've had, offensive coordinators we've had the last few years. You know, Jay, Sean McVay, and Kevin O'Connell. We struggled in the red zone with them, and 2 of those guys are, fairly successful head coaches in the NFL now. So what Bieniemy's doing on that regard is first class.
Yeah, he is. I want to. You mentioned the name earlier. I can't remember if you mentioned it before we came on air. There was Heineke chance today, and I can't get away from this show. I can't get out of the way of this show without bringing up his name. Heineke chats today. I know it's not time for a change in Atlanta, but should Atlanta have considered seeing Heineke?
I mean, look, gosh, I mean, this is such a hard one to answer, because Ritter was bad enough today that I think you can make the argument for it. But I would like to think that if Washington would have known him so well that we would have been able to figure out a way to make him make mistakes. And I would like to hope that some of them YOLO balls and pop gun arm passes he throws would have gotten intercepted if he'd have had the nerve to throw them against Washington. I mean, I can understand why they brought him in, and he's a safe pair of hands. And if they're absolutely convinced that Ritter is a busted flush and they can't go forward with him and they still want to compete in this division, then you know what? Then fine. Look, the Saints lost today. The Bucs are an underdog at home to the Lions. So Atlanta's potentially not going to lose any ground in this division. And and as insane as this is going to sound, yes, they could win the division with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. I think I'm going to go wash my mouth out with soap when it's over, since I just said that. But I'd like to think that us knowing him as well as we did, that we would have been able to cause problems for him and been able to exploit the weaknesses that we know he has. But this is undeniable. He is more clutch than Desmond Ridder, at least to this point. I mean, Desmond Ritter's had a few moments, but Heineke, even if they were lucky moments, had a lot more of them in Washington. That said, some of those throws Ridder missed, Taylor Heineke wouldn't have gotten within 10 yards of the receiver because they were such deep passes, and that's not his thing. So maybe and I'll finish it with this. He might be a better fit for what Arthur Smith wants to do than Desmond Ridder. That's what I think that I will say. Because Desmond Ridder looks mismatched, on top of the fact that his accuracy is just nowhere near where it needs to be for Atlanta to function, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely that. And, you mentioned Arthur Smith in your dialogue there. Arthur Smith made some key mistakes today. Which helped allow Washington Commanders to win. I know they're still in contention in the NFC South, but if you're a player on that team, you're looking at your head coach like, what did you do today? Or what did we do? Some of the delayed game calls that was late in key situations, right? Where you had you spiked the football to get more time, then you run out of time, and then you had to waste your time out so you don't get a delayed game. So now you have 31 seconds and you have to get into the end zone. Like, what are you doing, right? And
you know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of Nathaniel Hackett in Denver last year. Right. That's the kind of stuff early in the season. That's the kind of stuff that happened, and people went, "Whoa, this guy's not head coach material." I mean, Arthur Smith. I've had one of my dear friends in Facebook is a Falcons fan, and I've been arguing with him about this. That Bijan Robinson has to split carries with Tyler Algier. That they don't get him the ball enough in the passing game. That it took until today for Drake London to have a big breakout. We talked about it in the pregame. Your number one receivers were Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson, and Drake London was behind them. Drake London you took in the 10th pick of the draft, and of course they screwed Washington in that because that's who Ron Rivera really wanted, and then they traded back instead to get and ended up with Dotson, but he really wanted Drake London. Mm-hmm. Drake London's better than that. We shouldn't be talking about 6 games in and he's got 26 catches. To me, he's a legit number one receiver, or can be. Arthur Smith, the same criticism I'd say about Jack Del Rio's isn't maximizing his talent. It absolutely applies to Arthur Smith in Atlanta. No question about it.
They got him rolling today because he had 9 catches for 125, no touchdowns. But that's against the Washington Commanders. So
exactly.
And a lot of times he was matched up against Jamin Davis, believe it or not, in the slot sometimes. So he came across the middle. They was using that as well. But Arthur Smith, again, another one that I thought Arthur Smith was a bonehead play, and we didn't talk to. It was a 2-point conversion.
Yes.
The 2-point conversion, you're down only by 14, right? I don't know there's no chart in the world that told Arthur Smith to go for 2. There's no coaching chart whatsoever who told him you're down by 2 scores to go for 2, right? Only thing I could think about Arthur Smith was going for 2 was that he thought he was going to score again, right? And that all we need to do is score and we'd be up and kick a field goal and win. But you don't chase points early. You make that decision after you get the first touchdown. And that changed. That's the difference in the football game.
But that is an analytics thing versus common sense. Because I had people in my Twitter timeline defending that, saying, "Oh, 538's done a big expose about how you should go for 2 in that situation." But it's the mental part of this. It's the common sense part. 8 versus 7 is completely different. Because if you're up 8 points, it's like you have 2 chances to win as a defense because, okay, we got to keep them out of the end zone. But if we don't do that and we stop the 2-pointer, we're still good.
We're
And
still
it's
good.
a different deal when it's only a 1 point and you're thinking, crap, if we give up a touchdown, they're going to kick the extra point and tie it. I like going for 2 when you're down 1 at the end of the game to stop going to overtime, especially the way the overtime is now with this Mickey Mouse rules we have.
Ron Revere a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah, well, and I mean, and that you could argue that cost them the damn Bears game because again, you played an extra overtime period when you didn't need to, and you had to play 3 days later. It's craziness. Four days later.
Would you say that too? Because think about it, it shouldn't have been if it wasn't a 3-game losing streak. They could have been on a winning streak because if they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, I think they beat the Bears. They beat the Bears, and I think they beat the Atlanta Falcons. And now you got the Washington Commanders on this 3-game winning streak instead of up against the Wolves.
But you look at what happened in Denver because as terrible as giving up that Hail Mary was, they still had to get to 2. So it's like, okay, let's get over that, make the stop. Benjamin St. Juste makes the play to get out of Denver with a win.
Yes.
So Arthur Smith, the analytics is trying to ruin every sport. It's ruined baseball. They're trying to ruin basketball with it. People are finally pushing back, and they're going to ruin football with it. I'm sorry. I believe you don't go for 2 unless you have to.
Yeah.
The only way I like going for 2 was the situation in Denver where you get a penalty on the touchdown play and it goes half the distance to the goal line, you go to the 1.
Yeah, or if you don't have a kick, or if your kicker get hurt, you don't have a kicker, backup kicker, you go for 2 and you convince to go there. But other than that, going for 2 early, chasing points. In this situation, you wasn't down 15, you wasn't down 11, you wasn't down anything. You was down 14 points. Take the 1 point, made a difference in the football game.
The doggone Ravens today. They're winning this game against Tennessee. They get a touchdown to go up 15-3. It's the second quarter, and they go for 2. And I'm just like, you don't know what's going to happen. Get the 1 point. They would have been up 9 points in the last 5 minutes of the game without that. The rest of that game is so much easier for them at the end. It's just like, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Like you say, put that card away until the fourth quarter. Don't even look at that chart.
Don't look at that chart. Put it away. Again, could have cost the team. What did cost the team the W today? Again, those who just joined, Washington Commanders defeat the Atlanta Falcons 24-16. Washington Commanders are now 3-3, and a 2-1 away from FedEx Field. Next week they take on the New York Giants at home. New York Giants at home.
I thought it was in New York. Is that at home or is that in New York? I thought it was in New York.
I thought in New York. Let me double check here. I thought it was at home.
I thought it was in New York next week.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's in New York next week.
It's in New York next week. Sorry.
Yes.
It's not at home. It's in New York. The Giants take on the New York Giants in New York next week. George, final thoughts on this win. Will this calm down radio heads, all the noise from the embarrassment on primetime against the Bears? Will it be a little bit calmer this week for the Washington Commanders fan and coaches?
It has to be a little bit because you know what? They really, even though the stat sheet won't say so, if you watch that game, after a tough start, they were really good. They were really good in the second and third quarters. They didn't put this game away. That's the frustration. But they were really good for most of this game. And they got to give and in this and what was great about this is that arguably you won this game without doing much in the offensive phase. It was defense and special teams that won it. So I'd like to think that will calm the jungle drums from beating a little bit. But golly Moses, if they go up to New York and lay another clunker and they lose to Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, oh God, we're gonna be right back here in a week, just going out of our minds, honestly. Back it up, win again.
Yeah, put a winning streak together, get 2-game winning streak going back to Philadelphia, and on the 29th of October. Or Philadelphia coming to Washington on the 29th of October. They should get that. Hopefully that they can get it together and keep riding on this. I want to see them just ride, have confidence. I think the noise is calmed down this week. There are some things they can work on and improve. You still gave up 402 yards. But again, the secondary played very well, 3 turnovers, which was huge. And they scored off of 2 out of 3 turnovers, which was also huge for the Washington Commanders defense today. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the All Burgundy and Gold post-game show here on YouTube, Facebook, and X, as they want to call it. Make sure you subscribe to our pages. Make sure you listen. Make sure you subscribe to us. Make sure you check out our podcast each and every week on Fox Sports Radio 1340 AM, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Check us out each and every week. Make sure you subscribe to all Burgundy and Gold everything YouTube channel as well. Make sure you subscribe on Twitter, on X at all ABG_everything. Like our All Burgundy and Gold everything Facebook page, our All Burgundy Gold Instagram page, which is also at ABG_everything. That's everything with 3 R's. Make sure you hit us up. Once again, the Washington Commanders get the win today against the Atlanta Falcons, 24-16. George, appreciate you, brother. Always a pleasure filling in. They did a great job.
I'm glad to be with you, Glenn, as always.
Hey, you guys have a great night. Enjoy Victory Monday on tomorrow. Once again, Washington Commanders win 24-16 over the Atlanta Falcons. Good night.